And he also became disillusioned. He recently left the Love family and is here today with his dad, Steve Allen, to tell us how he plans to start over. Would you welcome Brian Allen and Steve Allen? This is certainly not your first visit with us. We've been here before, I think, and we talked briefly about this, and this is the first time we've met Brian. Looking back, Brian, 12 years ago or so, what was lacking in your life that you felt you could find by moving into a situation like the Love family?
Well, I was one of thousands of people coming out of the 60s, very disillusioned with life as it was in the United States, the war in Vietnam, and so on and so forth. And I think for me it helped satisfy a desire I had to do something, to make a difference on the earth, to do something towards good, to give my life to something.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe the Love family? There are many cults, but can you describe it? Did it have a particular philosophy?
Well, we were based on the Bible, on an interesting blend of the New Testament and the Old Testament. We very much based ourselves on Jesus Christ, but we had an interesting way that we grabbed the Old Testament. We identified with the tribes, one of the lost tribes of Israel, so to speak. In fact, we saw ourselves as Judah in the resurrected Israel. Mm-hmm. And we had rather grand ideas of eventually ruling the earth.
Do most cults have this sort of grandiose plan?
I think so. I think one of the things that satisfies people individually, even though I don't remember being aware of it while it was happening, is something about being special, mm-hmm. being chosen, being, you personally are going to do something. You are important.
This is typical of religion generally.
Yeah. Pardon me?
Typical of religion generally.
In that you can make a difference, or?
Yes, well, there must be some point to becoming a Methodist or a Muslim or a Jew or whatever. And it's always, I think, with the assumption that you can somehow improve yourself and the world.
Right. Now, it must be very difficult to sit down and have an argument with your son because he is going into a religious experience when I guess most of us hope that our children do believe in some faith, attend some church or temple or so forth. Were you that aware of cults at the time that Brian did this, or were you like so many of us? We just saw them at airports?
Yes, I knew very little about them until it became an immediate problem for me. I didn't do any study on it at all. Eventually, I did enough to write a book on this subject called Beloved Son.
Right.
But to return to your first point, Brian and I have never really had an argument. We do not agree about everything, but we have nevertheless not had an argument. And when I first heard about his decision, about 12 years ago, it came as a shock. But as regards many particulars, I reserved judgment. I couldn't oppose something until I knew more about it.
Mm-hmm. But that's one of the points that I remember in our conversation before, that
mm-hmm.
he was totally supportive, or at least certainly open to any type of communication.
I think that made a big difference, too, because since my father always left the avenues of communication open between us, that was very important. Within the family, some parents were very embittered by the decision to join the Love family, mm-hmm. and they closed the doors between them and their children. And I think what that does is it further reinforces the feeling that somebody's only love and security comes from within the organization. And it reinforces the feeling within the organization which tries to tell you that the rest of the world is bad somehow, mm-hmm. unloving and selfish.
What did you have to give up?
Everything.
Become a part
Everything.
of the Love family?
In order to come into the Love family, it was important that you disavow yourself of everything you own, physically and materially, and you
Money.
give up your name and take on a new name. And we were even asked to disacknowledge our connection to our born blood families.
Mm-hmm. Now, within the Love family, you were given the name Logic Israel.
Right.
And you met a young woman by the name of Simplicity.
Right.
Whose real name was Lynn.
Yeah.
I believe. You had 3 children.
Right.
And yet you were not married. Was marriage a part of, or was it not
No,
part
marriage
of the
was something we looked down upon. And the reason I'll try to briefly explain it. The reason we justified giving up everything was very similar to the reason we didn't believe in marriage. We looked out and saw the world as headed in the wrong direction, basically oriented evilly. That doesn't mean that individual people were evil, but there was like a curse on the earth. And the main symptom of that curse was selfishness. And so it was our intention to, by living together in a free, open, loving society, try to help heal that darkness by loving each other and sharing. And we wanted to get rid of all possessiveness.
The idea was for the couples to stay together out of their mutual love of each other, not out of an obligation or ownership.
Right. What were the conversations? I assume you had conversations during this 12-year period. What?
Many.
And in the back of your mind, I'm sure that you never gave up the thought that someday Brian might come out. How did you finesse that in these discussions, or did you even approach it?
Well, the implication of the question is that I'm somehow responsible for his coming out.
No, I'm just saying that most of us would not have the discipline to keep that part out of discussion between two members of the family.
I was always the questioner, the student. I wanted to know, and I had to do this in one sense to write the book, but I wrote the book because I did want to know, primarily. But I am in no way, I could take no credit or blame, as depending on who's looking at it, for Brian's decision. It's entirely his, and it came as a pleasant surprise to me, but very much a surprise.